The rising tide is lifting all boats. IPOs fueling investor optimism after a lull of several years. Crypto and tech are leading the bounce back. So think about it. You've had Klarna, bullish, Firefly Aerospace, Circle, Chime, and most recently, StubHub all went public. The president of the New York Stock Exchange, Lynn Martin, joined me, and she thinks that this IPO rebound is here to stay for good reason.
It feels like this has been a cautious reopening. Now, if you think about the last couple of years, there have been times when the IPO market felt open. If I look at Q2 of 2024, for example, when Reddit went public, when Rubrik went public, when UL Solutions went public, it felt like that was going to be the reopening of the market. So this year, it has felt like a very cautious and deliberate reopening. But importantly, as opposed to 2024, this year it has sustained. It hasn't just been one quarter of activity. It has been multiple quarters of activity, culminating with, most recently Klarna's IPO.
What is it that's drawing to IPOs? Because we've been through the VC and the private equity, and that's still very much a part of the early financing. But there is now a seasoning, if you will, to come to market.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. And again, a really good way to describe what we have seen as a prolonged amount of time that a company stays private. I actually think that's a really good thing, to be honest. Companies staying private for longer means that the company has the opportunity to codify its strategy, to be very deliberate about the TAM they are seeking to attract, about the customers they're seeking to attract, much more deliberate on the execution of the strategy. And what that means for mom and pop and global investors is that when a company finally comes to market, it's ready. It's ready to be a public company. I think what you saw in 2020 and 2021 is that companies were rushing to get to market to take advantage of incredibly high valuations. And what you've seen in the aftermath of that is many of these companies weren't able to continue to sustain those valuations. Whereas now you're seeing companies that come to market. You look at Circle, you look at Figma, you look at Klarna, companies that can sustain the valuation that they are achieving on their IPO day for medium to long term and continue to grow that valuation.
If we look at your own, at the NYSE and the ICE, and how, the NYSE Texas and the way in which also you're playing internationally, you are shifting. The exchange is shifting focus. It's changing. It's changing the international perspective. How would you describe it?
The U.S. capital markets are the envy of the world. And if I look at the depth, the breadth of the liquidity in the U.S. markets, the transparency of the U.S. markets, the ability to raise capital in the U.S., it cannot be matched internationally. It's why we've been successful in helping companies that were not previously primarily listed in the U.S. move to the U.S. as a primary listing. And you've seen those valuations significantly increase, again, because of the access to the liquidity that they're getting, which is really unparalleled.
How difficult does that make it for you to cooperate or collaborate with other markets when they know that many of their own members either are going to look to leave or add on the NYSE? In other words, you're in a very tricky position, Lynn.
Yeah, but I think it's important for us to continue to be the stewards of the global economy. And the only way you can be the steward of the global economy is to collaborate with domestic markets who clearly have a place